Afternoon, everybody. My name is McKenna, and I'll be the moderator for this session titled Breaking Through Brick Walls, Using Free AI Tools to Overcome Common Genealogical Research Obstacles. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We do have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link will be posted in the chat right now. And if you experience any issues related to conduct, please contact us via the email galeconferenceupport@googlegroups.com. Please be sure your microphone is muted. And during the Q&A, please wait until I'm going to read out the questions and then Kathrine will answer them. Q&A will be at the end. So throughout the presentation, as you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This session is being recorded and we are uploading all the sessions to YouTube as quickly as humanly possible. And you can enable captions by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. So it is my pleasure to introduce Kathrine Aydelott. Dr. Aydelott has a PhD in American Literature from the University of Connecticut and an MLIS from Simmons University. She is also an award-winning genealogist with a certificate in online genealogy from Boston University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Aydelott.
Thank you so much, McKenna. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me this afternoon. Let's talk about some free AI tools to overcome common genealogical research obstacles. I like to start by talking a little bit about why I'm here and why you're listening to me today. So I am an associate professor here at the University of New Hampshire Library. My role is the Arts and Humanities Librarian. And I also have digital humanities under my portfolio as well. The University of New Hampshire has about 12,000 undergraduates and around 2,000 graduate students. We are a land, sea, and space grant, R1 university, and we are on the seacoast of New Hampshire, just about halfway between Portland, Maine, and Boston. I've been a genealogist for about 25 years, and I am considered the resident genealogist here in the library. And I also have the privilege of being the faculty advisor for the UNH Genealogy Club. Aside from that certificate in online genealogical research from Boston University, I learned some AI skills back in 2024. Why does it seem like a long time ago? By taking a couple of online courses through the National Genealogical Society that were called Empowering Genealogists with Artificial Intelligence. And you'll note that the title there is about, the classes were about AI. They were not about genealogy. And so it was really nice that it was able to teach me about how to use AI in my genealogical work, but it was easily flexed to some of my work with the arts and humanities groups here that I support as well. So I'm going to share some of that with you this afternoon as we go. Here's where I'm planning to go with us over the next several minutes. I have a slide where I'm literally going to ask, is this session for you? If it's not for you, you can bail and go pick up something else pretty quickly. I'll do a couple of slides around setting the scene and how I work with folks with AI. And then I'm going to talk about some scenarios where some free tools will be useful. So we'll talk about brainstorming with some free LLMs, large language models. We will talk about making a source repository with Notebook LM. You may have been hearing about this over the last couple of days of the conference. I'm going to spend a little bit extra time talking about transcription and translation, and I'll be using the tools Transcribus as well as some of those large language models sort of in conjunction as a compare-contrast. So if you haven't looked at these tools before, this might give you a sense of what's working well and what still isn't quite working great. And then the last tool I'll talk about is FamilySearch's Full-Text Search. I'll conclude with some cautions and best practices, some closing thoughts, and then I do have a couple of resource slides at the end that will give you some of the tools and strategies that I've been talking about so you don't have to write everything down. So here we go. Is this presentation for me? Are you in the right place? As I was thinking about designing this session, I was really aiming kind of toward reference librarians who might be getting research questions from patrons in different contexts. Also, librarians who are already involved in genealogy or genealogical programming. Perhaps librarians interested in introducing users to AI and what I like to call small bites. You might take a genealogy focus with this, but you could also just take a regular humanities focus. Again, I'm trying to keep it fairly flexible so that you have some room to move around. And then if you're like me and you have an interest in genealogy, then I'm aiming this toward you as well. Hope you'll stick with me for a little bit. So how is AI helpful in genealogy, and what are some of the things we should look out for? Genealogy is a research project, and it's time-consuming and detail-oriented. And as genealogists, we hit brick walls because records are missing, connections are unclear, handwriting is illegible, and we can't read the language that the documents are in. And those are the kinds of things that prevent us from identifying ancestors and continuing to build our trees. And generative AI offers new ways to push through some of these problems. There are some things, though, that we have to remember. AI helps with some tasks, but not everything. And we have to remember that AI is fast, but not always accurate. But there was something that my AI instructor liked to say that I kind of like to imagine as well, and that's this is the worst AI we'll ever use. So even as we're just learning how to use these technologies now, 5 years from now, we'll laugh at all the things that we thought AI could do back in the day and only now can do later. And maybe things will continue to improve. Now, when I do work with students or faculty or classes with AI, I usually have to do quite a bit of thinking around how to manage other expectations as well. As if you're not familiar with using some of these tools, or if our users aren't familiar with using some of these tools, a lot of the hype is around these things can do everything. And we do have to remember that not everything is a nail, and we need to have multiple tools. There's still a place for Google. There's still a place for a lot of the other tools that we use. We are thinking about the fact that this technology is still very, very new, that ChatGPT 3 was only released in November of 2022. So we're really just coming up on its third birthday, and there are still things that it doesn't get right. So rather than thinking that this is going to solve all of our problems, I still like to think about using these tools as a way to save time. And then there are some dispositions I do like to impart with others as well, and these are coming really from the information literacy framework for higher education. Keep an open mind. We want to remember to be iterative with these tools. These aren't typically one and done, that you can try it again, add more context, see what happens. To look at a lot of the work that we do with these as an experiment. Let's see what happens. Feel that it's okay to fail. Failing is part of learning. And yet at the same time as we're working with these tools, the more we work with them, the more we are learning what they can do, what they can't do, and what we can do with them better. And then finally, we need to remember to check the work and be the human in the loop. So with all of that sort of set, I would probably be remiss if I didn't just mention prompting frameworks. We've been using the phrase prompt engineering, since we kind of got into these tools, and the engineering part is rapidly sort of going away. We tend to think more about prompting just generally rather than prompt engineering, but there are some frameworks. I know you've heard about some of these already this week, certainly, if not before. Several folks have mentioned Dr. Lowe's CLEAR framework, and that's to give the tool to make your prompts concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. And I love that. But my trouble is that it's hard to teach because my students don't always know if it's logical or whether their prompt is explicit enough. And there are certainly other prompting frameworks that you can employ. There's one that's Create, and that's to give the tool context, a role, expectations for what it's going to do, some actions to perform, and to think about tone and how to evaluate the response on the backside. I like that really pretty well, and I use a variety of that, but I am using the prompting framework that was taught to me in those National Genealogy Society classes back in 2024, and the instructor there was Stephen Little, and he is doing a riff on Dr. Lance Cummings's framework for prompting. And that's a role, a goal, a text, a task, and a flask. So I really like these terms because they're short, they're easy to remember. There's a little bit of a rhyme there, so you get the little mnemonic device there. Give the tool a role, act as, I don't know, a professional genealogist. Give it a goal. Your goal is to extract text from documents. Give it a text. If we give the tools a text, we are automatically reducing hallucinations because they're just working with the thing that you're giving them. Give it a task. You're going to extract data out of this will document, and the flask part is really just the output. How do you want this to be wrapped? Do you want the output as a bulleted list? Do you want a table that you can cut and paste into Word? Do you want code? Identifying that as part of your prompt will help with the output. And then, of course, again, if you don't like the first time it comes out, change your prompt, run it again, see what else happens. So you'll see elements of my prompting in some of the sample prompts that I'll show you in some slides coming up. All right, with the scene set, I'm going to start talking about some scenarios where these can be useful for solving genealogical challenges and the tools to use to do that. So the first task, I love using generative AI as a brainstorming or soundboarding tool. I love having a chatbot that I can use as sort of like a genealogy buddy or a running sort of assistant. And the recommended tools for this kind of work would be your general free versions of the large language models that are out there. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, any of the things that you might have access to. Typically, the free versions are perfectly fine for this. And if you're thinking along the genealogical lines, prompting could be something like act as a professional genealogist. I'm working on describe your current brick wall problem here. What types of records might survive that would help? The more you can engage in a kind of ongoing chat with the tool, the more you'll be able to think creatively about working with this almost like a person. It's not a person, but sometimes when we treat it like a person, we get better responses. And I have found this to be very useful. And so I will give you an actual scenario with ChatGPT. So this is a genealogy scenario, okay? Sally and Daniel married in Maine in 1819 before it was a state. And Sally's ancestry was well known, but Daniel's was more of a mystery. And I have Sally's 1830 divorce testimony from Massachusetts where they were living. And Daniel deserted the family in 1827. Sally's divorce was a particular kind called from bed and board, which technically didn't allow her to remarry, but she did. So I was chatting with ChatGPT about divorce law in Massachusetts in the 1820s and 30s. So here was at least part of my prompt. Please act as a specialist in Massachusetts law, specializing in divorce. I have Sally's 1830 divorce testimony. At that time, did a divorce from bed and board allow Sally to remarry? And we went back and forth with this for a while, and it would give me an answer, and I would add a little bit more detail about the research I'd already been doing. And ultimately, ChatGPT came back and said, you should write back to the Supreme Judicial Court archives in Massachusetts and ask if there are any additional records or petitions associated with this divorce that may have moved it from a bed and board divorce to a full and total divorce. And I went, gosh, should I do that? Because I already have the divorce testimony. Like, how much more am I likely to get out of this? But I was like, what have I got to lose? So I drafted an email. And a couple days later, the archivist wrote back with a scan of the divorce case. And the divorce case was the same testimony that I already had. It was in a little bit different hand. It was a different document. But the testimony at the end of it included additional depositions. And here's a snapshot of one of them. And in one of these depositions, the woman who is writing or testifying, Polly Proctor, identifies this mysterious Daniel as my sister's son and says that she had known Sally for several years before she married my nephew. And this broke the case wide open. So it was very easy to go from here to identify who Polly Proctor was, what her maiden name was and figure out all of Daniel's mother's line. And so we have that now, and we have a working theory for his father's line as well. And so I personally, I give ChatGPT credit for this. If ChatGPT hadn't said, you really ought to go back to the archives and see if there's anything else there, I would have just have assumed that I had everything. And to get the case back from the archivist, who I'd been back and forth with prior, to find these depositions at the end was just mind-blowing. So it was really, really successful and repeatable for other folks to do that. So that was a lot of fun. So moving on, the next tool I want to talk about is Notebook LM, and this is a nice tool to use. It's free, where you can build a source repository that you can then query. And this becomes really important for genealogists because we often work with so many documents that we can't see the forest for the trees. If only we could read all of the things that we are working with at once and start to see patterns. And you can do this with Notebook LM. So this is what the general interface looks like. And you can see that toward the bottom, it just looks like a regular, LM chat box. But you can upload PDFs and research logs and family group sheets and correspondence. It's best to work with typed stuff so that it's easily uploaded into, in PDF form, but you can upload other things as well. The free version right now is a current limit of 50 sources. I have 33 in the notebook that I'm showing here on the screen. And it's great for managing projects and looking again across a corpus. I was just listening to Matthew Mills's session just prior to mine, and he says he's having all of the students he works with upload all their documents into notebooks on Notebook LM to keep their class materials straight, and that's another great use for this. From this tool, you can generate guides and summaries and podcasts and scripts for podcasts if you want to do the podcasts in another tool. So all of this is a really robust way of working with different documents. And here's an actual scenario. So with those 33 documents that I uploaded in the snapshot of the interface I showed you in the last slide, or you could do a prompt like, how do these sources reveal your question about all of your sources? How do these sources reveal the interconnectedness of early New England families in my case? And you get a nice output that looks like this, very readable. And notice that there are source indicators for each of these paragraphs. So I would know exactly where this information lives in my corpus of documents. That can be really, really helpful. And the bonus, again, is there are fewer hallucinations because you're having the tool work specifically with the sources that you've uploaded. Now, obviously, use your ethical parameters, right? If you're uploading PDFs of texts, make sure those are in the public domain or that you otherwise have permission to upload. But this can be a real game changer. Remember to still also check for accuracy of the outputs afterwards. So in my case, I could ask this corpus, when was William Westcott born? And it's going to look across all of these. I've got a lot of 19th century town histories that often have genealogical lists of early settlers, for example, as well as a number of typescripts of family records that I've accumulated over time as a good genealogist. And the LM can give me where it's finding these names. So it tells me in this case, there are 2 William Westcotts. They have 2 separate sets of parents. They have 2 separate birth dates. This is good to know so I don't get them confused, so that I don't give one William Westcott the wrong parents. And it is giving me those sources so that I can go back and check that information on the backside as well. So it's fun to identify these synchronicities and patterns that were otherwise unapparent. Like you wouldn't be able to know where everything was if you were trying to map it all out yourself. So it's nice to have a little bit of machine help there. Now, those first 2 tools, your general free large language models and Google LM, they've been talked about quite a bit. I'm now going to shift to a tool that is a little bit more complex. And I'm going to talk about these in terms of transcription and translation. So transcription, I'm specifically talking about taking handwritten documents and transcribing the words in the handwriting into text that you could otherwise edit or manipulate, copy and paste into a document or report or something like that. Now, the most common tool that comes up when we talk about transcription is Transcribus. Now, I would have said Transcribus, but this is a European platform, and they do say either Transcribus or Transcribus when I've heard people talk about these. And this is what the interface generally looks like. It is quite a complex tool, and best used for documents that are consistent and structured. So think about things like deeds or wills or parish records where there might be some boilerplate language and then customized information to someone's family circumstances. This is also best for non-English scripts. So if you are working with genealogists who are doing work in Poland or Italy or France or German, if you're working with someone who is struggling with that heavy black Gothic font for a German document, this might be a tool for you to try. And it's really flexible, so it takes all kinds of formats of documents. You can use images, you can use PDFs. They all work, but it does have a little bit of a steeper learning curve. So I'm going to basically show you my trial and error here over the next couple of slides, and your mileage may vary, okay? So here's an actual scenario that I've run. And here's the screenshot. This is one of those depositions that I mentioned from the divorce case a couple of slides ago. And that's on the left-hand side. And you can see that the handwriting is honestly, if you can read it, it's honestly pretty good looking handwriting. The right-hand side of the screen is the transcription. So Transcribus is scanning my image of my deposition, and then it's giving me what it is abstracting out of that and transcribing that. And I've circled not even all of the problems. So I'm working with the town of Biddeford, Maine. Biddeford is spelled incorrectly every single time it's referenced. Names are misspelled and not spelled consistently. All kinds of other problems. February isn't spelled right. Nothing is right. So this will turn handwriting into text, but you might have to edit the transcript to make it correct. This right-hand side is an editor. So I could go through and I could retype all of that. Now, why is it having these problems? Probably because this isn't trained on US style handwriting scripts. That specifically. It is pointing right now, the tool that I was using is pointing to an English handwriting script, but English England, not necessarily English American. So I don't think it really understands our particular loopy style that was being used in this particular document. So the question is, does this save me time? Maybe no in this instance. So what I did was I tried this in Claude instead. And what's nice about Claude, this is Anthropic's Claude, the free version does allow you to do uploads. And the trick though is that PDFs have to be OCR'd. You have to run them through an optical character recognition tool to make it work with a PDF. And frankly, with handwriting, it's kind of tricky. So I used a JPEG. And this was my result in Claude. And wow, so much better. There are a couple of errors though. The name of the man here is Daniel Hill, not Mills. And the name of the Reverend, another line down, is Nathaniel Webster, not Nathaniel Witten. But if those are the only two terms that I had to check and change, that still saves me time. Now, I wanted to give Transcribus another run because, again, maybe not trained on US English stuff. So I thought I'd give it another go with a Canadian French document. So this is going to be a baptism record from Quebec. And here it is. And it is a document that broke down a brick wall by identifying correct parents and birth dates. So you can imagine why it would be important for a genealogist to want to transcribe this and have this as text that we could share a little bit better. So once again, you've got two columns really. The transcribus numbers kind of obscure that left-handed column, but most of the text is on the right column. And again, if you read through, if you can see anything on that screen, that I know it's tiny, really didn't do a great job with this one either. It's still not getting significant words correct, even though, you can point it toward a French model for how it should be looking at language. But again, I just think there is enough difference in the scripts that it's not quite catching it. So I did try it with ChatGPT Plus. I do have access to a Plus account. This is the one that's $20 a month. So it's not a free tool, but again, I kind of wanted to see across some of these LLMs how this would work, and this was the only way I could upload a document because the free version doesn't allow for uploads. But I did want to share my prompt with you. Can you first transcribe the text in the main or right column of this attached document, and then second, translate the document into English? Go line by line carefully. Don't make anything up. Use square brackets for words you don't know. I'm really trying to let it know that I want it to be exact. Focus, right? Puppy dog, focus, and don't make any mistakes. And if you don't know something, don't make it up, put it in square brackets. And this is what it gave me. And this is really pretty well done. Most of the French is really good. There are a couple of weird errors, though, that I want to point out. This Tessie is actually something that's a line break from the earlier line. And it figured out the first word there, baptise, that's the one that was broken, but it kept this Tessie thing here on the end, which is weird. Also, the woman's name is Marietta Cote, not Cloutier, but at least it was consistent when it read it wrong both times. And the other weird thing that it got wrong was the actual French says le père absent. The father was absent. He was absent at the time of this baptism. And instead, ChatGPT is saying, it says le père a déclaré, the father declared. And I'm thinking that this is probably the text prediction model for ChatGPT. I bet a lot of times the father does declare that this is true, but in this case, the father was absent and it just couldn't figure that part out. I do want to point out that it did have some trouble with a couple of places that were a little bit scratched out. It put those in square brackets and did change the font to brown. And there is a note at the bottom that tells me what it was doing. So it was very clear about what it was doing. And it's just a little funny that it didn't quite get it all the way right. But did that save me time from typing all that French? Yes. And just to be, kind of more thorough, I thought I'd try it again with Gemini, in case you are more used to using that. And again, the free version includes uploads, and I did use a JPEG again. And here's the transcription and the translation. I'll talk about translation again in just a little bit. And here again, what it got right and what it got wrong was kind of funny because almost all of it's correct at my first glance, except the date that the document mentions. It's the 4th of November, not the 14th. And again, that looks fairly clear on the actual document. So the fact that it couldn't quite get there, but did that save me time? Sure. So again, a quick note about translation. Most LLMs have been trained on many languages, and all three of the LLMs that I tested here did really pretty well with the translation. But again, the caution is to check carefully for errors. And if you wanted to see the translation that ChatGPT did, remember this is the Plus version that I was using. It did also very, very well. And the errors that remain in here are the errors from the transcription that I didn't have it correct before it just gave me the actual translation into English. So you still see, for example, the father has declared. Still saves me time. So I thought that was pretty handy. Now there are other options for transcription. You could use Google Lens right off your phone, for example. That Oh, here's a screenshot of that. Tends to be best for really short, very clear passages because you have to hold your phone really steady. And so that's really difficult if you're doing any, like a letter would be really impossible to do. So short, very clear passages. The genealogists are using it often to grab information off of, say, tombstones. You could use it for, you know, small sections of like a city directory or something. And so your mileage may vary here, but it is something that you could try. You often have it in your pocket. There's also a tool called Handwriting OCR. It's a freemium tool, so you have access to it for free initially, but you may need to pay in order to use it longer term or for more sophisticated work. It is an option if you wanted to experiment a little bit further. And then if you do have access to ChatGPT, the free version, fine, but if you have a plus or something else, a higher level account, there are custom GPTs that focus specifically on handwriting transcription, and you can look for those when you first log in. There's an option to explore GPTs, and you can go in there and do some keyword searching for transcription. That can be handy as well. Not all free accounts allow you to have full access to those functionalities is the only caution there in terms of free, if we're talking really free. All right, so that's going to close off transcription and translation a little bit. Otherwise, translation, you know, if you wanted to throw it in, copy and paste into Google Translate, that's fine too. And again, you just have to know that you're going to have to kind of cross-check that, maybe cross-check it against several tools to make sure your translation's correct if you're not really familiar with the language. Now, again, I would be remiss if I was talking about free tools for breaking down genealogical brick walls if I didn't mention FamilySearch's Full-Text Search. And I mentioned that I am the faculty advisor for the Genealogy Club here on campus. Most of my Genealogy Club students are genetics majors these days. That may surprise some of you. It's no longer the history folks, the humanities folks. It's a lot of them are coming from genetics right now. They're testing their DNA with Ancestry and then building their trees in Ancestry, and then they're getting frustrated that they can't find all the documents they need. And I have been really working hard to teach them that Ancestry is a business and they want your money, and that's why you're seeing ads everywhere for them. You're not seeing ads a lot for FamilySearch, which is affiliated with the Mormon Church. But the library in Salt Lake City, where they are located, is the largest genealogical library in the world. It has US records, but also loads of international records. It's a wonderful library to research in if you've ever had a chance to be out there. A lot, probably 80% of what they provide, you can access for free through their website. You just need to sign up for a free account. They will not email you. They will not spam you. There's no proselytizing or anything like that. They just want an account to associate with your computer. And this full text search is an experiment right now. So it's in their labs area, and I'll give you the URL at the end, so you'll have access to that. And that's what it looks like. And it does combine features from some of these other tools. So it does take bodies of handwritten records, it transcribes them and makes those transcripts searchable. So we suddenly have access to material that was absolutely obtuse before. Think about handwritten court records from the 19th century that the only other way you could ever look at them to see whether they were relevant to your particular family was to go page by page by page by page through a digital microfilm. So let's take a look at the second. Again, I can't tell you how much you can get information, genealogically relevant information for free online these days, but so much hasn't been indexed and isn't searchable. And this particular tool, the full text search, transforms the handwriting into transcription, making it searchable. And this is a list of the search results and the search interface that you get when you are getting a results list. Librarians will appreciate the column on the right-hand side. You can see the search that I was running here, including my keywords, my place, and my time frame. There are search tips underneath, and you can use truncation, you can use wildcards, you can use phrase searching. And what's nice is you don't have to just search for names. You can search for landmarks. You can search for neighbors. You can search for items that may be genealogically relevant, but don't often come up when we're actually thinking about searching. Think about a deed, for example. A deed is going to be indexed by the buyer and the seller, but not necessarily by the neighbors where the boundary lines are, or that oak tree over at the corner where the marker is. And you can actually search for those things through this tool. It's not perfect. So once again, the transcription, depending on the handwriting, doesn't always come out great. And at the same time, it's been an absolute game changer for thousands of people, including myself, in searching what otherwise would be impenetrable. And I'll give you an example. So this is an image of a will. And it's a will of a woman who married 3 times. She survived 3 husbands. So her will is indexed by her final last name, okay, which was Walton. This is Sally Walton's will. And even in this document, you can see that her initial will was written under her name as she existed under her second husband. She was Sally Clark. And so her identity was completely obscured. There was no reason for her ancestors, her descendants, to be looking for her or any connection to her family under either Clark or Walton. Those names are not otherwise relevant to this family at all. I was searching for other members of what we now know to be her family, and this will came up, and you can't read it well here, but the bequests that she lists very clearly indicate her family name, her married name, her maiden name, Andrews, and name her brothers specifically, Darius Andrews, Paris Andrews, her sister, Mercy Tucker, who we'd already identified, but we had no idea that Paris and Darius were brothers. And she lists other siblings we had no idea existed. This is an absolute game buster as far as a document went. And the article will be published in a genealogical journal later in the year. So this tool can really be revelatory in terms of solving genealogical problems. If you haven't had a chance to play with it much yet, I really encourage you to take a look. So as we start to come to a conclusion, I do want to mention a couple of cautions and best practices, right? Think of AI as a research assistant. Use it to clarify, organize, draft, or reflect, but don't let it replace your expertise. Don't trust without verifying. AI can misread words or hallucinate. You've seen examples of that. Always go back to the source. Do cite your sources. That's part of the genealogical proof standard that we uphold as genealogists. AI can help brainstorm, but your citations must come from original records. We don't have a good way yet of AI making these really difficult and complex citations automatic for us. And certainly don't upload sensitive data. Don't put in your DNA matches. Don't put in client names, in living individuals, or proprietary research. Just be mindful. There is an ethical parameter we should be working within, and keep to your ethical standards. My closing thoughts. I will also say, as you may have heard many others say, I'm not an expert. It's tough to be an expert when these technologies are developing and changing so quickly. I am happy to answer your questions either today or moving forward. And you have my email address here. And my mantra, it's all about the learning. My last 2 slides are, as promised, my resources. These are references to those prompting frameworks I mentioned, including Steve Little's and Lance Cummings's. And finally, a list of the tools that I mentioned. And I've also included a list to a really nice playlist of transcribist tutorials on YouTube, which can be really helpful when you're working with that tool. And that is all I have for you this afternoon. I am happy to answer questions if I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So don't forget to put your questions down in the Q&A. while we're giving a moment for people to digest all that fantastic information, I did have a question of my own.
Sure.
So you mentioned how things, many of the AIs like Transcribus work best with documents that have a structure, right? Like a will, or what about newspapers? Because newspapers are notorious for having different structures in the different columns, but they're different.
So what I would do is I would try to get a screenshot of that newspaper column that you're interested in. The bonus with newspaper columns is that it is fairly structured and that there's some typescript there. And I would definitely try it. And you may just need to have some bandwidth to try it across several tools to see which one might work best. And it may vary by article. But I do think it's possible that could save you time and not having to retype all that information into another document. Give it a shot.
Thank you. Kimberly wants to know if you can add your email to the chat,
Sure.
which I figured you could.
I
Also, if
can.
you send me your slides, I can put those resources into Discord so that people can automatically click on those as well. My other question was, you mentioned that Transcribus works with non-English scripts, but the examples you gave were the Latin Romantic based. How does it work on the ones where they aren't those Romantic languages, where they have different alphabets and scripts? So I'm thinking like Japanese, where Google Translate is notorious for being horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I haven't looked specifically at all of the different models that you can use. And what would normally happen is you have a document, it's in a particular language, maybe it's in Cyrillic too. I mean, we could think about all kinds of other languages that might be relevant here. What you tend to do is you look for a model that will work against that language. And if it's been trained against that language, it tends to work better. I didn't have any better examples, and rather than go and look for other things, I thought I'd just give you what I had, but go to Transcribus and see if there's a transcription model based on the language you're interested in, and then see if you can run a couple of tests.
It looks like no questions, which means that you did an awesome job. Yay. So thank you so much. This was fantastic. I will share the resources in the Discord once Kathrine sends them to me. But otherwise, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I really appreciate you being with me today. Thank you.
So you all have about 15 minutes to get to the next sessions as well.
And I get a little break too, so
you get a break.
I'll see you on the screens. Thank you, McKenna.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you too.